Hey friends, before we get started, I wanted to tell you about another podcast I'm on. If you're a longtime listener, you know our friends at Castalia Cocktails are a great place to go for a top quality, crafted, thought about drink to enjoy. But what's behind that? Well, my friend Dr. Kevin Peterson has a new podcast called Cocktail Sense, where we together dive into that and talk about how your favorite cocktails come together. We get into the science and art of balance and flavor on Cocktail Sense and have some fun along the way, too. So check out Cocktail Sense in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. And let's get started with today's show. Hey, everyone, from the Daily Detroit studio at Techtown. This is, of course, your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. It is Thursday, January 25th, 2024. I am Jer Stays, and across the table from me, I am very happy to welcome back in person Mr. Norris Howard. What is the Prince of Brightmoor? King of Brightmoor?
We'll just call that. The Duke.
What did you say last time? You claimed a title, sir.
Yeah, the Crown Prince of Brightmoor.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be me, the Duke of the West Side.
Were you coming in from Minnesota of Brightmoor? Because last time it was not Brightmoor.
No. Well, it was Brightmo. See, because I had to speak in my native tongue. Brightmo. But now, since we back, we got to bring it back. Are you what
they're calling code switching, sir?
I am indeed. What's going on? Happy to be back, man.
It's good to see you. How do you like your new gift? I can reveal to people that the gift this year, because we were a finalist for Best U.S. News and Politics Podcast. However, each individual award trophy, they wanted more than $200 for.
Okay, that's stupid.
We don't have money for that.
No, that's ridiculous.
So instead, members of the team, the regulars, got Funkos.
Yeah, custom Funkos.
Yes.
I really appreciate it because I actually have a line of Funkos in my basement for my stream setup. So this will go right there. And people are going to say, what's that one? And I'm going to be like, it's me.
All right, so there's a lot of things we could talk about, Norris Howard, but here's the thing. I didn't want to talk about this one.
I know you
I was going to just, I got a term for this. When I see some BS on the internet, it's roll and scroll. I roll my eyes and scroll on by. Moving. Especially because, 3 posts later, I saw an apology, and I was like, man, are we going to get worked up over this? Is this something we're going to do? And you all in my inbox, you all on social media, whether it is the council president of this city of Detroit, whether it is musicians, whether it is activists, whether it is whatever, everyone's mad at Stephen A. Smith,
boy.
By the way, let's be clear, exactly what Stephen A. Smith wants us to do.
Yes.
Number one provocateur, without a doubt.
1,000%. So listen.
And this is why I didn't want to do this, but we're going to do it because y'all asked for it, because it's feeding the trolls. It's exactly what he wanted from us, and respect for that. I'm not mad.
It's an art form to be able to get this kind of reaction out of an entire city. And let me just say this, all right? I love this city as much as anybody else. I grew up here. It's in my blood. Everybody the vast majority of the people I've ever loved and cared about have all come from this city. So I can't get mad at folks for wanting to defend it.
And we're going to play the clip for people in a second.
Play the clip. However, all I'm going to say is he didn't necessarily lie. There's a lot of things you could call Stephen A. Smith. I don't think liar is one of them.
Let's play the clip and talk about it.
Here's where it resonates for me, and it's just on a personal level, Shannon, D.O. Here's the deal. Detroit, phenomenal fan base. Yeah. Great city. Been through a lot. The downtown area, big time. The stadium, big time. But you go to other outskirts of the Detroit area, it looks like a damn desert town. I mean, I'm sitting here wondering how the hell people making money. I'm just looking. It looks like a desert town. I'm just looking at it and I'm like, what the hell is going on in this city? And then you see the Detroit Lions coming up and sort of reviving. Just giving. They were on. They were on a respirator, for crying out loud, just as a city. And what this franchise has done for that city and that state, I mean, it's you gotta go there to see what I'm talking about. Because when you get away from the downtown area and when you get away from the arena, from the stadium, and then you're just driving around, I mean, it's different, man. It's different. And so to know and to see the kind of impact this is having, Lamar is Lamar. That is a spectacular story. And boy, I'm hoping he makes the Super Bowl. And that would be something special, Shannon. And you're right. But right now, right now, seeing what Detroit was and what it has been revived into, knowing that the Lions have everything to do with that, it extends beyond football and it extends beyond the individual. And that's where I'm coming from with it.
So the thing a lot of people took offense to was that, he is a national pundit. He often will fly over here, although I have physically seen him in Detroit. He has visited
More than
Detroit.
once.
Yeah, much more than once. Obviously, he probably visited some suburbs as well.
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned some suburbs in his apology and some other things. But it really hit people in a certain way. And I am remembering to the days when I worked at the Detroit Regional News Hub, and I used to work as a concierge with national and international reporters telling the Detroit story before Dan Gilbert basically hired a PR team and took it all over.
Yeah.
This is not unusual. I have seen some comment of this for probably dear narn, all darn tootin'. Dang darn tootin'.
Dang near
40 plus years of existence.
Yeah.
Kicking Detroit is what it is. And I'm not even sure at the end of the day he necessarily meant to, but he did say some dumb stuff.
Yeah.
He said some dumb stuff without a doubt. But why do you think there was such a reaction to this?
I think because it's partially true. I hate to say
Son
it
of
that
Detroit
way.
is saying that.
No, it is. It's partially true because listen, we can talk all day long about the development of downtown, midtown, Corktown, in certain areas up the Jefferson corridor, so to speak, right? Jefferson Chalmers and Indian Village going into the Grosse Points and all that. We can talk about that stuff all day long. And those are positive things, net positive. That's all good. And I love it. I'm down here spending my money all the time. Here's the thing. The neighborhood I grew up in ain't seeing none of that action. The neighborhood many of us who grew up in the city grew up in ain't seeing none of that action. People aren't seeing that action on the Deep East Side like that. People aren't seeing that action on Chalmers and 94.
Dickerson, where my great-grandmother lived, doesn't look like it does in the photos at all.
Exactly. People aren't seeing that action in Aviation Sub. People aren't seeing that action I could go for neighborhood to the point where even the conversation around the entire city is separated into downtown and quote unquote the neighborhoods. So I think the reaction was so strong is because it was very much so I could talk mess about my family, but you can't.
Much like you got in trouble with the person from Hazel Park.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think to a certain extent, that's fair. That's fair because I've never lived in Hazel Park and I've never considered myself a part of that community. So you know what? I took that L and I said that was fair in many ways. And Stephen A. has given his mea culpa as well. But I think it hit us so hard because there is a certain kernel of truth to the things that he said.
I think back to comedian Josh Prey, very popular online, talked about he was doing a show and he walked a few blocks out and he ended up over, on Martin Luther King and West. And there are obviously projects happening over there and developments and things, but I don't think we're used to what other cities, how they're filled in. Does that make sense? Because when you're talking about downtown Renaissance, you would think you could go a couple of blocks off of Woodward and still pick it up.
No. And that's the issue is that if you're coming from, especially somebody like Stephen A., who's a New Yorker, or somebody coming from Los Angeles, or even just small but dense cities like Seattle or Portland or any place that has been sort of stable for the past 25, 30 years, yeah, those downtowns don't look like ours. Those downtowns don't have an inch of space in them, period. Even if they have vacant storefronts, there is nowhere for you to make anything new without tearing down something old.
And we can be fair and lay some of that blame down at property owners downtown, especially
1,000%. 1,000%.
Is sitting on all these parking lots where if you come and visit that game, sure, the renderings of District Detroit look amazing and all that, but the skepticism on it is off the charts, especially now with the recent delays.
It's in the ether, as far as I'm concerned, right? There are elements of truth to that for people who are coming to Detroit from dense cities, and we got to be honest with ourselves and saying that reaction is how a lot of people were going to feel coming, people who moved away and haven't been back home in 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah, those people are saying, oh my God, look at all the cool new stuff. But to Stephen A.'s credit, he even took the time to venture outside of downtown, which is what most people aren't going to do, and even see what was going on. For me, while I think he was the wrong person to say it, and I think it was the wrong time to say it, especially considering that the city is kind of on an emotional high right now. Like, let us have our emotional high. We don't get many. So let us have our...
He didn't even need to go there.
That's what I'm saying. Like, let us have our emotional high. That's the criticism I would lay at his feet. Because what New York been doing from a sports perspective for the past, outside of the Yankees, for the past 10, 15 years? Nothing. So we can have that argument, but talking about the city, I think it stung so hard because it's stuff that we've been saying to each other and to ourselves for many times.
Or if you listen to this podcast.
Or if you listen to this podcast that we've been saying many times, and we just didn't like an outsider saying it. But we got to grow up sometimes as well.
For me, it's about walking tall. Right.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I was going to skip by it is because I have heard about this so many times. And, I've worked on a variety of projects around the city for a long time. And what I've learned is you can't convince people. Going into the comments and like arguing doesn't do anything, because a lot of people have made up their minds, whatever experience they had, maybe whatever prejudice they have or whatever belief they have. It's the same thing. I hate to say it, when people are like, oh, well, San Francisco is terrible. You visited San Francisco terrible. It's not terrible. It's a section. But
as what most things are.
But people look at the news, and maybe this even gets to a greater conversation about media. One of the challenges is that more and more people don't want objectivity.
No.
Like we say, like everyone's like, oh, I wanted just the facts. Or they say, what happened to the news? No, they want it. And I'm calling out some people here. They want it their way. They don't want to listen to an opposing opinion. It is a unique individual. And I know that our listeners and our newsletter readers are those unique individuals. 100% sure of that. But most people want to hear what they want to hear. And I think that's part of the root of the challenge with media in general, where you've got the cuts at the LA Times, Pitchfork going away, the New York Times grabbing up basically every writer and eating up all the space as far as the money and the conversations. Media is in crisis across this country right now.
Yeah.
And it's not a Detroit thing. It's an everywhere thing. And it is more and more because, yes, there's those platforms grabbing up all that revenue, but also us in media have to adapt too. And for me, it's, okay, here's where I am and here are the facts. And you come to your conclusions, but I'm not going to like come to you with a voice from nowhere that I don't feel something.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I wouldn't go as far as to call it irresponsible, because like I said, I don't think he necessarily lied about anything. He's just, again, sensational to the point that you were making.
He was just on the Howard Stern show a couple days ago talking about his other show that's a podcast is into politics all the time now.
Yeah, and that's what people want. People want sensationalism. But the thing about it is, as it pertains to Detroit in these comments, yes, it was encouraging to see people respond and to see Mary Sheffield make a video on Instagram about it.
Detroit made shared something that was done by Stephen McGee, and everybody loves the videos that Stephen McGee has done for the city. It was fantastic. Jessica Care Moore jumped in.
It was great, and I love to see that kind of stuff, and I love to see people jump to the city's defense. But also at the same time, I feel like we kind of got to get out of that small town, small mind mentality, because low key, people talk crap about New York and LA constantly, every single day.
Post anything about urbanism, people be like, I could never live in New York. No one cares if you couldn't live in New York.
No one cares, and definitely not people in New York. But that's what I'm saying, is that if we're going to feel a certain way about the city, let's act like it. If we're going to act like improvements to the city of Detroit
and the region, honestly.
And the region, if we don't act like we're really about improvement, then let's really be about improvement. And let's really talk about getting the schools back on track, even though we spend more money per student than the national average. Where is that money going? Even though we have this downtown revitalization projects, but we have more surface lots in the middle of our downtown than any downtown I've ever seen. I just came back from Vancouver, and Canada, to me, is doing a better job at being America than America is, at least when it comes into its cities, because they're densely populated, they function well, they have great public transportation, they have great education, they have great healthcare, they have all this stuff that we tout and we say we have, but we don't.
Well, some areas do.
Yeah, some
areas do, right? Like we have a listener who loves their library system and pays a ton of money for it, but there's less than 10,000 people in their community.
Exactly. And I'm critical of the city of Detroit because I love it. And that's what I mean, is that if you really care about this city, it's okay to be critical. It's okay to defend it sometimes too, because again, if somebody came in from the outside, I'd defend the hell out of Detroit. But we also got to be honest with ourselves, and let's not overblow some of the things that have been done, and just be a little bit more measured and say, you know what, he's right. There are some improvements that need to be made. We're on the right path. We're headed in the right direction, and we can do better. I think that would have been the proper response, as opposed to being a knee-jerk to say Detroit's all the way back.
But it got a lot of comments.
It's not.
To me, it's hard when a measured response, nobody cares, right? The response I feel like you and I are talking about, the one that I initially had until my phone here starts blowing up from you all. And thank you. I appreciate the feedback, even if I don't always agree with it.
That's the beautiful thing about it.
Walking tall, that's part of it. So what we need to do, and there was an essay years ago by Eric Thomas, that you got to love Detroit more than like the hamburger seed of like loving Detroit, right? You got to go in, whether it is the city of Detroit or the communities around it or working together, you got to do more than buy the t-shirt.
Yep.
I think that's the thing. And if you'd like a Daily Detroit t-shirt, dailydetroit@gmail.com, or a rocks glass for our Patreon members, but you got to do more. And doing more means spending the money or going out and talking to people or working on specific projects. Like coming up is the state of transit coming up with Transit Writers United. We're going to talk a bit about that in the next coming week. Education, you name it, find a way to do the work. And I know that's a really big ask, because in other cities, sometimes it feels like you don't have to do that.
No.
But that's part of what it means to be a Detroiter, is to do the work, to do that extra work. It's not easy to be here, and that's part of why it's rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was put very succinctly. You know, I don't want people to think I'm coming down too hard on I was about to say my countrymen, but on my fellow Detroiters.
The country of Detroit is a thing that has been proposed in the past.
Yeah, I know. But on my fellow Detroiters, but I just will say that, yes, I understand we are a prideful people. It does hurt when somebody with the platform of Stephen A. takes a shot at us. But also, at the same time, I want people to take a little bit of pride in that and to say, you know, he's saying that because we on the radar now. We went a very long time without any mention of Detroit in the national context. And now you don't have a choice. And now the entire country is rooting for the Lions to potentially go to the Super Bowl. And now people are talking about potentially moving back to the city because they see the improvements.
People are moving back in some of these cases.
Exactly. People are moving back. We are seeing certain improvements, and I think that's fine. But we can't jump the gun and act like everything is cool all of a sudden because a football team decided that they wanted to be good this year.
One of the things I've learned is that sometimes with the glow comes the hate.
1,000%.
That's part of it.
They hate us because they ain't us.
All right, before we go, a couple of things on the east side I want to talk about.
Let's
I know
get it.
this is strange for you.
It's not that strange. Shut up.
Crossing Woodward is a weird
It's
thing.
not that weird, okay? I had a whole half of my family on the east side for most of my life. So
well, let's bring up something that might be interesting to you.
Sure.
A $14 million project in Chandler Park broke ground. It's going to be an indoor recreation area. I'm glad to see Chandler Park see some investments. I know there's a couple listeners to the show who were attached to this project who I think I talked to like before the pandemic. To me, it's good to see a neighborhood investment like that where it's like, oh, I don't have to go to the Y downtown or something like that, because we don't really have as many of those resources in the city.
Yeah, facts. And we used to. We used to have a lot more community centers and
not that
rec
long
centers.
ago.
And not that long ago. I'm talking about within the past 10 years where a lot of those rec centers have closed. So it is good to see this. It's good to see the investment. I wish it was something that felt like it had more permanence. You know, I'm still all for our old Art Deco architecture. So I want, you know, fancy edifices and all that kind of stuff. But listen, $14 million investment in the Chandler Park is a net positive. This is going to be great for that community, and I'm looking forward to it.
130,000 square foot domed field house. It's going to have basketball, volleyball, pickleball. Pickleball in the city now? I knew it was in the suburbs. Pickleball in the city now?
It's the new racquetball, man. I just
Have you ever tried pickleball?
I played
I can't even say it.
Pickleball. I played it once, and I'm just like, this is the most retirement home game that I've ever played. Like,
See, I want to try it.
Listen, like any game, I think it's fun. You get your little sweat in. It's cool. You know me, man. I'd much rather get on the pitch and kick a ball around, man. I'm all for full contact sports. Okay.
The nerdy thing I want to shout out about this, there is a 200 space parking lot, but it's bioswaled. So it's for stormwater management. So it's not
Nice.
just blank parking lot, which I appreciate, and something important on the east side.
Yeah, it is. As a matter of fact, I was just reading a piece, I believe it was from Bridge Detroit, about how, many large swaths of the east side sit on floodplain. And
buried rivers. I want to actually
the buried river story.
I want to talk to the professors or the researchers around that study at the U of M Dearborn. I was actually reading that study this morning. Like, I think I want to get these people on the show.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Quick summation. I know we're running short on time, but quick summation. Apparently all across the city of Detroit, because of construction fill and all sorts of other projects, that there's a ton of buried creeks and wetlands in the city of Detroit that have just been filled in with loose dirt. And that's why you have so much flooding in certain parts of the city, even though it's flat land and there shouldn't be. It's a really interesting story. So having that parking lot for water management is actually pretty awesome.
Now, do you remember Harpo's?
I do.
Okay, so have you ever interacted with Harpo's? Have you been to shows?
I've been once.
Once.
I've been once.
I'm even surprised you've been once.
Yeah, I've been once. Not
you don't scream metalhead to me.
Not usually. I mean, I listen to everything. So not usually my crowd, but I've been once. It was a part of my childhood because my grandmother lived in that area in between Chalmers and Dickerson. And so I saw Harpo's like every weekend. So even if I never went, it was just a part of my life. Just the
you
band
can't miss
itself.
it, right?
I can't miss it. Yeah.
And there aren't many of these old theater style buildings left, even though for a long time this has been converted to a venue. It's apparently for sale. It needs money for upgrades. The idea is they sell it and try to get that money and still stay as a tenant to try to keep still having these shows.
Yeah.
I have a lot of memories of Harpo's. I just got to be honest with you. It's where a bunch of like the metal kids hung out. And I still remember, here's the thing about Harpo's, and I mean this is no disrespect. It's a party palace. And so you open the door and it hits you in a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just did. Like, whether it was the bathrooms or whatever, like this was is a raucous place. And they're trying to like do some upgrades, which frankly, I'm sure are needed because it needed upgrades 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah, and listen, I think it's totally okay to still have those divey venues because, I mean, the aesthetic and the feeling and the energy in those kinds of places you can't replicate, right? Like, we couldn't make a new Harpo's if we tried. There's just certain places like that. And so I hope it's able to get the funding. I hope it's able to stay afloat because I do think we can't put something new there. We can't make something new out of Harpo's. It's got to stay what it is. As much as I'm usually the one that says knock it down and put something new there, that's one of the ones where I'm like, you can't do it.
Look, it's hosted everyone from Snoop Dogg to Iron Maiden.
Facts. And that's the thing. It's a wonderful, wonderful venue in an area of the city that nobody
when we say wonderful, we're not here saying expect the Fox Theater.
No. I'm not saying wonderful like that. I'm saying wonderful because of your experiences.
Yeah.
Like the experience you can have at Harpo's is actually an experience that I find is dwindling across the country. You know, the dive venue is kind of disappearing.
Yeah. And unless they own it, but it's sometimes hard to keep that up because there's a lot of wear and tear with these things. Well, I'm curious about your Harpo's memories. dailydetroit@gmail.com. 313-789-3211. Tell us we're wrong about Stephen A. Smith or tell us we're right or whatever. But I figured we had to bring it up, Norris.
Yeah. And I'm interested to hear what you guys say. I'm pretty sure a lot of you are going to disagree with me, and I think that's okay. But, I just want us to stop feeding the trolls and just keep it moving, man.
With that, I am Jer Stays.
And I'm Norris Howard.
Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Don't forget to leave 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.